challenge was based on really helping men find their identity in Christ, not in what they do. Like, man, like you don't belong in this low level space of just barely getting by and barely knowing who you are. Every man is called to impact.
So can you hear me sometimes when I'm in my office? Because it's right around the corner from yours. He said, yeah. And I said, I'm so sorry. I don't know how to not tell everybody good morning and sing when I don't know how to not be that. That's who I've always been. And he said, who told you have to be anything other than you? He said, I know who I hired. He said, I know who you were. Listen to me what the man said. I'm telling you what the man said. You don't even remember. I guarantee you he doesn't remember this. He said, I knew who you were before I hired you.
Wow.
Each of us were born with greatness on the inside of us, but when we ignore it and don't embrace it, then we house it and then we die. And if you think about it, the wealthiest place in the world, Brian, is the cemetery. It's full of gifts and treasures of unpublished books, gold platinum songs that have never been heard, or groundbreaking cures that haven't been discovered because we were afraid to take a risk. And I think that when you live in mediocrity, part of it is because people are afraid of failure. The people who live extraordinary lives, they don't see failure as failure. They see failure as lessons.
And when we get in the process, we go through the crushing. You know, it's hard. It's like, oh, why is this so hard? Why is this such a challenge? But it's really the point of God breaking all this stuff off of you. He's breaking things that should not be there. It's crushing down, you know, that breaking that flesh down, getting all that extra stuff. Then he starts to clean you up and, you know, remove all the debris. You know, this is the part where the renewing of the mind starts to happen. You know, he starts to wash us with the word and transforming us by the mind. And then he starts to separate us, because as your mind separates, then your circumstances in your circle starts to separate.
Yes,
you know?
I'm preaching now, yeah.
Well, all of that, I was like, the process is the exact same, you know, but people are willing to stick with the process when they realize that I'm going to get a diamond at the end.
All right. How are you guys? How are you guys doing? How are you guys doing? Thank you so much for tuning in to another awesome, amazing podcast episode here at Brian's Place. Hope you guys like that new intro. Just something new, you know, to add a awesome, cool introduction. Definitely praying for everyone affected by these fires. They are no joke. We pray you and your family are safe and out of harm's way, and it's definitely a reminder of how grateful we are for the precious gift that we call life and for the people in it. Well, with that being said, today we are in for a treat with a capital T. Did I say treat? Yes, indeed, a treat. Today, our featured guest is a OBM, Organizational Behavioral Management. Also, she is a founder of Behavior Genius and founder of Genius Ops. She is a wife, a mother, and she is over the operations in ministry. She has also been recently chosen to be an analyst in the Breaking Barriers and Bridging Generations, prompting professional growth and innovation and behavior. And most of all, today's featured guest has an awesome, amazing heart after God. Give it up for Portia James.
Hey, how are you? Excited to be here.
I greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much for again for taking the time to come on.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm honored. when you asked, I was like, absolutely, I want to be a part of that. So I'm excited to talk today and, see what comes
Yeah.
up.
Sounds good. I know you got a lot on your plate, got your hands in a lot, but that's awesome. You are definitely walking in purpose. So that's pretty awesome.
Thank you. Thank
Yes.
you so much.
So my first question is, how does a person transform in 2025 into what they were always meant to be when maybe their reality and situations that they may face in 2024 didn't necessarily reflect the transformation they were hoping for?
That is a loaded question because I feel like you just read my entire 2024 to me. 2024 was a hard year for so many people. And it was definitely a hard year for me. I felt really lonely in that until I started. I think God started placing me in community. And so I started being more vulnerable and outspoken about some of the things that I was experiencing and realizing that I actually was not alone in that. A lot of us had a really hard year last year. And I think for me, the biggest lesson that I'm taking from going from 2024 to 25 is the lesson around surrendering. I carry a lot of titles, and so a lot of responsibility to make things happen or work things out or fix things or things like that. And so for me, what God really shared with me this year was that, or last year, is that it's time for his people to completely surrender our ideas, our plans, our strategy, and our entire outlook and perspective to him and to what he's doing. And so I really feel like that is the best way to transform what we thought was going to be a good year, and then it kind of turned out not to be a great year. We're going into a new year, and every year, especially in entrepreneurship, we have this attitude that like it's just going to be new year, new us. We kicking the door in, and I still have that. I still do feel empowered by that spirit of just a renewed sense of purpose and renewed vision, but pairing that and choosing to co-collaborate that vision and every single next step with what God is asking me to do and with where God is guiding me to go.
Yeah.
I think really that's the best transformation that any of us can have, is the one that's sponsored fully by God and his purpose and his will.
Yeah, I love that. That's so important. And the key word, I believe, is surrender. It's
Yeah.
like if you've been trying to make things happen on your own, but you're not getting anywhere. They say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing, expecting different results. So
Mm-hmm.
at some point, you got to be like, okay, here you go.
Yeah, yeah. It's doing it differently. I think, it's interesting. I'm a creative, and I am an innovator. I have several ideas. I can take one idea and it kind of bounces off of each other, and I'm thinking about what's the next thing to do. And I feel like I'm constantly in a place of evolution, of metamorphosis. And so transformation for me, I feel like from year to year, I see how different I am and how much I've grown and learned. But I have, really had to take a look even at the way that I was utilizing my gifts, because I have certain gifts that allow me to be very in tune with my work, that allow me to move very quickly through my work. And I think what I was doing was kind of beating God to the punch. And so having where something would happen, I'm like, oh, don't worry about it. I have a solution. I'm the
Yeah.
solutions person. I'm an operations person. It is in my nature to be able to problem solve and fix things. And I say my nature because I have several years of experience in operations, but really it's something that I love. I use intuition, right? I move with just this flow and this ease. When there's an issue, I can come up with multiple different ways to solve it very quickly. And so I think that being one of my greatest gifts really closed out the opportunity for me to stop and slow down and really say, okay, God, I have 2 or 3 ideas of how we can fix this, but what is your best way? Or really some things don't need to be fixed. I learned that too at the end of last year in relationship. that sometimes things don't really need to be fixed. So I'm coming in thinking that I'm solving a problem or that I'm helping a situation that God is removing intentionally. And so I was keeping myself in perpetual cycles and relationships. And so, just learning how to slow down enough to say, okay, I think God is saying, I know you have the skill, but I want you to, lay that
Yeah.
aside and allow me to submit, to be submitted fully to what God is trying to do. It's hard.
Yeah, it's tough, and I believe like on that same note, it's so important to be able to differentiate the season you're in. Um,
Yeah.
it's like it's like the trees know when it's time to let go, so something new could come, and just there's a season for everything. Season to so it's like just being able to know which season you're in and why. And also, I've learned that there's people for every season. That someone who you may have been close in the last season, maybe
Mhm.
they haven't been given the capacity or the grace to go with you to the next altitude in this new season. So it's
Yeah.
like it's been real, but you know, and that's I believe that is one of the tough things.
It is. It really is. You're right. Identifying what season you're in. Like, sometimes we are called to reconcile certain situations and revive certain situations. And other times we're just holding on, and I was talking to a friend earlier, and she was talking about, she said she was reading her Bible about, not putting new wine into old wine skins. And I feel that it resonated with me because I felt like things were being made new and I knew it. I knew I was in a season of like walking in and stepping into something new that God was doing and that there's discomfort with that. But I was trying to keep the old people and some of the old ways with me, right? And trying to and then it just started feeling like I was just forcing them and dragging them and you're right. Sometimes people just don't have the capacity to go, or they're just not meant for that season. And that's hard, but it's a lot easier when you realize that.
Yeah,
Either way, it's a loss, but when you realize, God's intention and plan and strategy in that, even in the loss,
hmm
knowing that, okay, well, I know that whatever it is that I'm feeling that I'm losing is going to be replaced with something that's just going to blow my mind,
yeah.
so it does make it a lot easier to let go.
Mhm. I
Mhm.
love that. That is great. I love how you put that as well. And one of the things you have not only walked into, but that you are spearheading in amazing strides is you are a founder of a Behavior Genius. How was that started?
Oh, well, I've been working in behavior analysis since 2006. So I was going to say 2016, but no, far before then. Since 2006, I've been a behavior analyst working with kids with behavior needs, specifically mostly autism, but with a variety of different behavioral needs. And so I've been here in the Inland Empire. I kind of started as a behavior technician. And so I've worked one on one directly with kids. After I obtained my certification, I started carrying larger and larger caseloads. And really, I kind of just worked my way up in the field. And
Hmm
so I got to a position where I was working as director of clinical operations, where it was my job to oversee the clinical directors in 14 different states, 16 regions. So I had 16 directors that I oversaw. And my job it was a lot more operational and a lot less clinical. My job was to help their companies, or not their companies, but their regions grow and flourish and thrive. So there was a lot more organizational data
Yeah,
management at the organization level. So that's kind of where I started to find like, oh, I kind of like this. It was fun being with the families and the kids for
yeah,
10,
yeah,
12, 15 years, but this is like my next step. So I did that for about 2.5, 3 years. And then I complained about a $60,000 pay disparity between myself and a white man in the same position as me in a lateral position. And I complained to my manager and the HR department of the company that I was working with. They said that they would look into it and assured me that, of course, there was
yeah.
a good explanation for it. And by the time I got to my car, I was locked out of my email.
Wow.
Um, yeah. And so, of course, I was devastated. I took a few months off work And I was consulting on the side at that time. So I just I upped my consulting hours a little bit as much as I could just so that I could survive and really think about what my next steps were. I had never even been in trouble at work. So I like a slap on the wrist, nothing. I'm like the model employee.
Yeah.
And so I had a really hard time with just realizing that that was the day that I realized that I wasn't in control.
Hmm.
Um, and it's hard. It was sobering to not be in control of something that you have, worked for your entire life. I
Yeah.
had
Yeah.
a long career and I went to college and I knew what I wanted to be when I was very young. And so I took a few months off to kind of just decide what it is that was next for me. I was afraid to go back to work because of that lack of control. Um, and so I said, well, I'm going to have to do something afraid. I'm either going to have to go back to work and risk giving my all to someone else's vision or someone else's dream and then having it stripped from me at their convenience. Or I can start my own thing, do what I know, and just kind of put one foot in front of the other, and build a workplace that I personally don't have to be afraid or recover from, and hopefully to be able to pull other people out of workplaces that are, harmful and abusive as well. And
Yeah.
so,
Man.
so from there, I landed a contract with IHP, which is one of the largest healthcare plans in Southern California. And I started assessing kids and we grew from there. In 2020, right? It was in March of 2020 that we officially opened, the day that everything shut down due to the pandemic. So it was a crazy time, but we made it through. We grew very quickly, and I've learned a lot about myself and about business in the last almost 5 years.
Wow, that's awesome. And I just want to take some time to unpack that a little bit. So, what's so awesome is that you were not only able to confidently walk away from what was a comfort zone, but you were able to take a stance. And I'm sure your voice ended up being the voice that maybe others didn't have the courage to voice. And so, not you were able to do that, and then you were able to identify your next and also identify that your next wasn't necessarily in the hands of someone else, but your next was hidden in something that God had already placed in you, and then you transition into that. I think that's
Yeah. Yeah, it was scary.
yeah,
I thank you for calling it courage, but I think more so I had to choose between two things that I knew I was going to be wildly afraid of. And, I chose to walk alone with God, at that time. And it was hard because I just didn't know what was next. And I didn't want to own a big company. I didn't want to have employees. And it's funny coming from me now. I have over 100 employees. We service over 200 families here in the Inland Empire. And I'm scared. I'm doing it scared every day, honestly.
hey,
But
yeah,
I didn't feel like I felt broken at that time. It just didn't feel courageous. Nothing about it felt courageous. It just felt like I knew that I had to take it one day at a time. And if I had stood up for myself in that setting, then I knew that, doing the next thing, I already had got fired. I'd already lost my job. So
yeah,
nothing was going to be worse than that. At this point, it was like, I might as well just put my chips into the middle of the
hey,
table.
yeah, might as well.
I was going to see what happened with another company anyway. Anything I did was just going to be
Yeah,
taking a chance. And I decided, to take a chance on myself rather than taking a chance on another company or,
yeah.
invest myself in that way.
That's so awesome. In Vegas, they always say bet on black, but I believe like the best thing you can bet or invest in is yourself.
Thank you. Which happens to be Bet on Black is appropriate.
Hey,
Bet on Black is a great tagline.
there you go. Oh, that's great. That's great. And so you went from that point to now being, in a sense, breaking barriers and making history as a first ever company curated and committed to the advancement of Black behavior analysis. Of course, major congrats on that. And so to go from that to that, like, how does it feel to be the first ever? And when did that come about?
Oh, it's scary being the first of anything. It feels, I think what feels empowering maybe for others is scary for the first person, the first to do anything.
Yeah.
It feels like I'm walking in the forest and I'm the first one in line.
Yeah.
But what sparked it was I just, I built my company and realized I had no mentors.
Mm.
I really didn't have any resources. I just every day I just had to like pray about it and take the step. And
Yeah.
prayer is always going to be prayer, right? Connection to
Yeah.
God is important, but
Yeah.
it's also important that we have resources. We have people that we can ask our questions to, and it just felt really lonely, and I feel like I made mistakes that I didn't need to make, or I just maybe took the long road when there was an
Mhm.
easier way to do something. And so I started getting a lot of people asking me, as I would branch out a little bit more and speak at conferences and things like that, I started getting specifically Black behavior analysts asking me if I did mentorship.
Mm.
So in behavior analysis, there are only 4.9% of all behavior analysts are Black. And there's over 50,000 behavior analysts in the
Wow.
US. So
Yeah.
just, yeah, so you can fit them all into one
Yeah.
conference, actually. And so for people to kind of start to hear my story, once I got over the fear of sharing my story, I started to share a little bit more, and other Black behavior analysts would hear my story and they were like, oh, we just want to know who you are. Do you do
Yeah.
mentorship? Do you do coaching? Things like that. And I don't mind. I love mentorship. I love leadership. I enjoy coaching. But what I thought would be more helpful and cost effective for other Black business owners, just trying to kind of start up, would be to give them the tools that they needed to actually start up, right? So not to sit and just talk about feelings, but to sit and go, what operational tools do you need in terms of systems? Do you know how to start an LLC? Do you know how to do a trademark? Do you know how to write a standard operating procedure? And so everything that I had created in terms of processes and procedures and policies and things like that, I
Yeah.
started to share those with other Black behavior analysts so that they could feel confident in starting their company, knowing that they had a person that would walk that walk with them. And
Yeah.
that is when Ingenious Operations was born.
That's awesome. You continue to be the blueprint for so many others. So yeah, tip my hat off for that. That's huge.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Definitely. And another question. So how would you dispel the myth that customizing therapy means straying from evidence based practices? How do you like conjure that and bring people or show people the right or correct thing about that?
Yeah, that's a huge one, because the entire Behavior Genius has gone through this rebrand over the last, I would say, year and a half, where being a board certified behavior analyst, we have certain like ethical principles and ways that we carry out behavior analysis,
Mhm.
that really, if I'm being honest, at times can be exclusive, right? Whenever you have a science, everything becomes so black and white that it doesn't really account for that individuality, which individualization is one of our it's in our ethics. Like that's a standard in behavior analysis, is that we're able to individualize programs for our clients. So I think it's just really about taking it a step further. And so I've done a lot of work in individualizing when I was working in the field, and I'm just trying to like bring that now that I'm not the clinician,
Yeah.
working directly with the clients. But it's important to individualize based on like cultural norms, based on specific, like, it's important to be trauma informed and understand what specific barriers or variables that child or that family is coming up against, that I
Mhm.
don't think are always considered. They're at least not taught. So in my training, I learned from experience, because I was born and raised and I received all of my education and training in San Bernardino County, which is one of the most impoverished counties in the nation. And
Mhm.
so I got to be literally in the homes with the family, seeing what they were going through. And it took for me to say, how do I take all this knowledge and all of this information that I have? A lot of times you meet a scientist or a data analyst or a behavior analyst, and they're like, I have science. And so they bring all this brain power. And families, Black and brown families, that is not of that's not of highest importance for them, right? These people they're having food, and housing insecurity, and they have been in places where they've been judged, or maybe they have a family member that's not working. And so one thing that I've learned is that when people when people are worried about their primary needs, food, shelter, work, just their livelihood, the science goes right out the window for them. They
Yeah.
need a
Yeah.
treatment plan that is going to be executable for them. And also, I think that one thing that's not always taken into consideration is that families have these kids with special needs, and sometimes whatever the child is dealing with is hereditary. So we're dealing with families also who we're telling a parent, we're trying to like speak the science to these families who also read at a sixth grade level, right? Or
Yeah.
they're an English language learner, or they have their own mental health issues. And so individualizing and customizing programs doesn't just mean, just bringing the science and feeding that science or force feeding that science to the family, but actually uncovering exactly what the needs are of the family, which I think is the most ethical thing that we can do, is to make sure that the services that we're providing are actually accessible
Yeah.
to the families outside of therapy. So in behavior analysis, our goal is we get in there and we teach the child everything that they need, to grow and to flourish in the different environments that they're in, but also that when we fade our services, that we don't leave the family without a blueprint and without a
Yeah, that's good.
treatment model that they can continue to use as their child advances and grows and goes into different areas. And so I think that it really takes equal parts of head and heart. We have to be able to think and have strategy and develop programs and things like that. But before we can even have the right, that gain and earn the trust of a parent so that they will be able to carry out the therapy within their home, it's important for us to establish relationship. And the
Yeah.
way that we do that is by just meeting people where they are.
Yeah. Wow. I love that. That's so good. So, like, if a child has a wrong behavior pattern from something they learned at home, how do you help them correct that particular behavior pattern?
Yeah. That's most of what we do. Kids, everybody, kids, adults, we all learn things, and that's what
Yeah.
becomes part of who we are. And so what we do is especially when we're dealing with problem behavior, the first thing that we do is we assess the reason the behavior is occurring. So there's a reason why every behavior occurs, right? If
Yeah,
you're
that's true.
like, my foot is itching right now and I'm scratching it. And so there's a reason for why I'm doing what I'm doing, chewing gum, right? Anything that we're
Yeah.
doing. There are reasons, and sometimes they're deep rooted and sometimes they're right on the surface. So the first thing that we do is we assess what the reason is, that, or we call it the function of that behavior. Is that behavior occurring because the child gets attention every time they engage in the behavior? Or maybe they get access to something that they want every time they engage in the behavior. Maybe they escape something they don't want, so the yelling, the screaming,
Yeah.
cursing, whatever it is. Maybe they're getting sent out of the classroom for doing all of those things, but truly they have social anxiety and they wanted to be sent out of the classroom. So we're only making the behavior stronger. So what we do is we look at and measure the reason. Once we determine the reason that the behavior occurs, then we give the person alternatives. So what to do instead. So kind of like if you think about, I like to use adult examples like smoking, because smoking is a behavior that we do, that we get reinforced. Not we, I am not a smoker, but people who
Yeah.
do smoke, that they get reinforced for smoking. Usually when people try to stop smoking, or receive treatment to stop smoking, they have to find an alternative that also provides them with the same stimulation or a similar feel as what they get when they're smoking, right? So they chew gum instead, or some people go to the gym, and you'll notice that people who have like addictive personalities, they'll stop smoking, but then they'll be gym rats, and they'll be like, or they'll drink energy drinks, and they'll like,
Yeah.
yeah, because it's an alternative. And so
Yeah.
that's what actually is we give kids or adults or whoever we're working with an alternative to the previous behavior, and then we reinforce that alternative. So we say, hey, instead of screaming or cursing to try to get your way, why don't you just try asking nicely, or why don't you just try waiting until mom's off of the phone? And then we make sure that we're extremely consistent. So a no is a no. Once we know what the behavior plan is, we follow it with precision every single time. But we really try to give most kids or adults who have difficulty communicating or conveying their thoughts or their needs, that's when you start seeing problem behavior. And so we just give them ways to convey their needs. Even kids who can speak have trouble knowing what to say. And so we know if we teach the replacement behavior and then we get really excited about it and they start to get what they want and need only when they engage in the replacement or alternative behavior, then that other behavior, they just no longer need it. It's
Yeah.
it's no longer necessary or effective for them.
That's good. I love that. And it's so awesome because you're not just changing a child, but you're changing like the future because the children are the future. So
And
you
that's the
definitely
goal.
have, yeah, you definitely have an impact in tomorrow, you know.
Thank you. Yeah, that's the goal.
Yeah. Legacy, legacy.
Yeah. It's so interesting too because I have always had that mindset. That's the reason why I work with children and not adults specifically, because I'm like, you meet the adults and all you can really do is treat them,
Yeah.
but when you work with kids, you can change them. And like treatment can really, like, you can mold them for what they're going to be. And so having clients that I've known, I have one particular, but I have several. But I have one particular client that I've known since he was 3. I assessed him right after he was diagnosed, and he has been with me all this time. He'll be 22 in
Mhm.
May,
Wow.
and he works at Behavior Genius. And so it's just really, you're right. And this is a child who like was not super social and was very impacted. And now
Mhm.
just the other day I was with him and he was at work, and he was saying he was protesting. He didn't want to go into the room that we were asking him to go into to help in the art class. And I said, what do you want to do? Ask him what he wants to do for work. And so
Yeah.
we asked him what he wants to do, and he said organize. And we said, okay, well, after you're done organizing the office, what do you want to do instead? And he said, I want to help the kids. um, and so I thought, there's this, I think, thing that we do where we discredit the hearts of the people that we're serving too, right? We assume that if they aren't communicating in the way that we do, that they don't have some of the same feelings or the same desires or the same passions. And just to hear him be able to say this little fiery nonverbal 3-year-old be 22 now, and be able to say, I want to help the kids. It had 2 layers for me because number one, he has passion and he has purpose, and
Yeah.
God is able to work that purpose through him, regardless of how we perceive it, what he's capable of. But also to work with him for so long and then have him have the same passion that I have.
Yeah.
I was just like, oh, he wants to do what I do. And so it's really powerful to actually be able to be in the field in this area for so many years that I'm actually able to see that future and how those kids, who they grow up to be. And so it's always humbling to see, because we know that the impact is there when we're doing the work, but it doesn't always feel good when we're doing it. We don't get a
Yeah.
whole lot of appreciation and thanks while we're doing it. But when we're able to see those kids later on and know that we impacted them, it's really special.
Yeah, that's awesome, and it's great because you're able to bring out the butterfly in them when all they see is a caterpillar themselves. So that's
Yeah,
pretty awesome.
yeah.
Yeah, continue to make a great difference with that. That's
Thank
great.
you.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
So some of the greats that you hear about, Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, you know, if you listen closely, you hear about them talking about how they stay in their zone, and their zone is like that place that space where they're at their most optimal level, where they perform their best. So, business wise, how important do you feel it is to be able to be in your zone, in your
Oh my gosh, it's a 10.
yeah,
It's so important, and how you stay in your zone too, and being intentional about that is important because as a business owner, it's easy to get caught up in a little bit of everything, right? And so
Yeah,
just
yeah.
right now, I'm training a new executive assistant, and she's just been shadowing me all week. And so she's able to see like that I exist in all of these different facets, just within the organization. And then I have personal passions that I pursue, right? Like work for the church and things
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
And so it's really, really important because the noise, there's so many distractions in business. There's so many recommendations or requests or, you know, emergencies where people they think it's an emergency. I had to teach myself and other people, well, just because it's your emergency doesn't mean that it's my emergency.
Exactly.
My
That's right.
priorities are different than yours. Yeah. But I teach myself too. I didn't have to jump for every emergency because that time away is so
Yeah.
important. So just journaling or reading a book about leadership, or, you know, I spend quiet time in the morning. I wake up extra early. Last year, one thing I really wanted to do was to develop a regular prayer time
Mhm.
where, you know, God wasn't just getting my crumbs where I'm like, oh, I'm
Yeah.
driving in the car on my way to pick my kids up and let me just turn the music off so I can say this little prayer real quick. I
Yeah.
actually want to have quiet time where I can hear from God and I can journal and just to slow myself down. Last year, early in the year, I used to go to this hotel in Temecula by myself, completely isolated. And I would go for just 2 nights and just really be with my vision, you know, hear what God had for me, think all my new ideas. Maybe I would finish up a project. Um, but it's so important to take regular time away and intentional time away to just, you know, remember, because as you're going in the day to day, it's like you start with a vision and then you start going and then new things happen. And it's like you start branching off and then you forget that the vision is back here and
Yeah.
there's a destination, you know, that whatever started here is actually what's at the end of that destination too.
Yeah.
And so you start to forget just being in the day to day. And so, you know, there's so many other obligations, you know, parenting and marriage and, you know, spirituality. And there's just so many different avenues to go where my thoughts can go every day that I literally have to find isolation in the day or in the week, or, you know, sometimes it only can be in the month, just to refresh myself so that I can. And when I do that, I try to travel as much as I can too, and actually unplug from work while I'm traveling. And when I come back, I realize I'm just like, I have so many ideas and they're not always new ideas. It's just that I have clarity. And
Mhm.
so getting out of the clutter, it helps me to be reminded of some of the ideas that I've already had. And now I have clear vision for them or a clear strategy for them because I gave myself the time to kind of offload
Yeah.
what comes at me in the course of a day. It's important. It's 10 out of
Yeah.
10.
That's good. It's so important. It's like one thing I like to tell people is that every building you've ever been in was once just a thought in someone's mind. So technically, you're standing in the manifestation of someone's thought. So just think about how many of your thoughts like people are waiting to stand in. You know.
Wow, that is powerful. That's really powerful. I have a godson, and his mom, he has cerebral palsy, and so he's developmentally delayed. But he went to Behavior Genius, and he's been there several times. And it's so funny because one day he goes, "Who owns this place?" His mom was like, Portia owns this place. What do you mean? And she explained it to him like that. She said she thought of the Behavior Genius, the people in it, and the building, and the decorations, the paint on the walls. She thought about that from her brain. Like that came from her brain.
Yeah.
And to hear her explain it that way was really powerful. What you just said just reminded me of that, because I was like, at one point it was just a thought. And I think we take that for granted. We don't always give ourselves enough credit when we are doing things and when we are
Mhm.
walking into the vision, right? Like one day you literally just decided, I'm going to have a podcast
Yeah.
and
Right.
do it every day. And you have record. It's so crazy how
Yeah.
that works, you know, where it's something that we can create and then to be able to look at it in front of us,
Yeah.
manifest. is powerful. And there's a lot of people who just won't take those steps to manifest. And so I think we don't give ourselves enough credit for the ones who do step
Yeah.
into our vision.
Man, that's so true. And it's funny because when I was younger, I used to always want to be on the radio late at night, playing the slow songs, to giving dedications, giving people hope. And so now I got this podcast. And like when I first started this, and yeah, back in October of 2019, I wasn't sure what I was doing. I just felt the need to share the motivation and gifting God had placed in me. So all I had was my phone on at the time, and now here it is 9 seasons later, just still at it, inspiring people. I'm like, wow, grateful.
Amazing. Yeah. And podcasts are so cool too because you get the opportunity to just be inspiring people all over the world,
Yeah,
and touching people, and it's so accessible. And I just commend you for having the grace to continue in doing it, because 2019, and then it's like we had COVID, and
yeah.
there's so many things that can interfere with just the day to day.
Mhm.
I have been saying for years, oh, one day I'll have a podcast. I'm like, what am I going to talk about? Nobody wants to. I talk myself out of it all the time. So I have big respect for people who can be consistent, because I think that's the most difficult thing to do, is to show up every day, for an audience that you don't know is going to show up for you, and you just kind of put it out there and hope, right, that people
Yeah,
do. But
yeah,
the message is important, and that it's going to land with the people that it needs to land with. And so
yeah,
you
definitely.
show up every day for those people, which
Yeah,
is really special.
thank you.
Yeah.
I'm grateful for that. So you once said rest isn't your weakness; it's your secret weapon. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, going back to just the talk about getting time away, and being able to slow down the high, quick, fast energy. There's a lot of, in the U.S., capitalism, it has manifested in who we are, how we work, how we show up. There's this feeling of like needing to move fast, needing to constantly be on, right? Having to work 9 to 5, or guilt
Yeah,
if you no rest, no sleep, right? And it's like glorified not to rest, not to sleep, being able to work, 15-hour days or whatever. And so, but Brian, I'll be 40 next month. So I
yeah.
have team no sleep time of my life, and that
Mhm.
time has passed. I have 3 children. I am far from that. And I'm noticing like more and more. It's like, I don't know if I'm just tired of running this race, or if
Yeah,
it's age, or probably a combination of both. But I've just really learned in the last few years just the value in slowing down and having true rest. And also, how radical rest is. Rest is revolutionary, especially
yeah,
for Black women, because that's not something that our parents and our grandparents ever gave themselves or us permission to do, is to just truly rest.
Mhm.
And rest doesn't necessarily mean that we sleep 8 hours at night, or that we have, certain routines that, that feed in little breaks. Rest really means being able to spend the time rejuvenating ourselves. And that's how we come back as our best selves. I think we're constantly operating from like, we're rarely at full at 100%. If you think about, my husband uses like, my bar is low. That's what he'll say. You know how your bar gets
Yeah,
low on your
yeah.
phone battery, and so
So,
our batteries are drained, and they're in the red, and then we're constantly refilling our batteries to like 25%, and then we're using the phone. Then we refill it to like 83%, and then we're using it. We're never actually filled at capacity where we can just completely rejuvenate. And it's so important to do that, because that's how we operate at our optimal potential.
yeah,
So I think that it's something we have to do intentionally, because it's not allowed, it's not
mhm,
celebrated.
yeah,
Um, so, when I first started resting, really resting, like just disconnecting from everything, or even just sleeping in on Saturday, or having dinner and not having my phone on the table, not checking my email.
mhm,
Um, when I started putting my out of office reply on, like, y'all are going to get this email back at my leisure.
yeah,
Um, when I started doing that, I had a lot of guilt, because I was like, oh man, even when I hire someone to help with the cleaning, because a lot of times we take time, our time that's off work, and we're using that time to work in other ways, right? Like as women, especially, but working in our household. And then I homeschool my children. So it's like if I'm not at the office, there's other work for me to do.
Yeah.
And picking up a broom doesn't have to be, I chose the one that was the least, that's the one I can move out of the way first. I was like, this is not my ministry. Someone else loves this and
Yeah.
needs a job. But it took me months just not to have guilt while I would be resting or playing with my kids or reading a book and watching her come and clean my house. I had guilt about it because I was like, I really
Oh,
should be doing
yeah.
this. And so, but allowing myself to have that rest, again, going back to just having the clarity,
Mhm.
showing up and just moving everything else out of the way and being able to really use all of my brain when I need to.
Yeah.
Uh, Rest has been the catalyst and really the only way that I'm able to show up well in all of the different ways that I have to show up in the course of a day.
I love that. And your best is hidden in your rest.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember I used to think I was too old for naps. Not anymore. Good.
Nope. Go on and take a nap. It's about 2 o'clock. Right when my body tells me, I'm like, you know what? And I have a hard time sleeping during the day, but I will. I'll get up from my desk and just go lay on the couch and
Yeah.
just do nothing for a minute, just to kind of,
Yeah.
cycle through my day and then, allow that to fall off of me so I can continue. It's so
And
important.
that's so true what you said, because like when you think about it, even the most expensive car at some point needs to be still long enough to be refueled. So if that's true for a car, then for us it's like how much more, none of us have the energizer battery inside of us. So at some point we have to be still long enough to be able to rest and recharge.
100%. Even like when you when you talk about cars, it reminds me of my dad. My dad, it used to bother me because he would take me to work when I was a teenager, my first job, Wiener Schnitzel. And we'd get in the car and he would be like, "Oh, I need to warm the car up." And it felt like he was warming the car up for like 20 minutes. And I was like, Dad, I don't think you need to, I think you can just get in the car and go. And he would talk to me about how, like, you're going to learn when you get your own car certain things that you can't do. Right. And
Mhm.
so certain ways that you keep this car for 20 years. And so it used to annoy me because the reason it annoyed me is because I was late. I would have been late. Like, I didn't have an extra 20 minutes to sit in the car.
Yeah, just
But I think, one thing I've tried practicing this last year is to that same effect is waking up in the morning and warming up before I just would get up right to the minute, rush my kids around the house, probably giving them, an anxiety disorder, rushing them around the house and getting out to go to school, dropping everybody else, sliding into my desk, and then being barely late for the meeting and, brushing my teeth as I'm walking to my desk, just craziness. And I realize there's even rest in the way that we show up to the morning.
Hmm.
So my kids, we don't homeschool at 8 a.m. because we don't have to. I work from 7 to 11 and my kids homeschool in the afternoon. And it
Okay.
gives them the space to wake up, all of us wake up, make a cup of coffee, pray in the morning, walk the dogs, do our self care. There's so many other things that are more important than work that I found it really important that if I had to choose my kids' school schedule, that I didn't choose one that would have them getting up and having a panic attack on the way to school because they're late or because they're,
Yeah.
just trying to wake up. It's important that we can warm ourselves up and give ourselves at least 20 minutes in the morning to just like be with the
Yeah.
morning, and be grateful for the morning. And that changes everything too, because then you decide like, what kind of day am I going to have? What's on my plate?
Mhm.
What kind of day am I going to have?
Yeah.
And so when you mentioned the car, it reminded me of how my dad, he would, yeah, he made sure that the car was warmed up. And I got to give it to him because our family car, we probably had that car for 22 years.
Wow.
And so if we have to give that much care to a car, imagine all the different ways that we're missing that we should be caring for ourselves as well.
That's true. That is so true. That is great.
Yeah.
Love that. From determination to manifestation, major, 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 major congrats on your
Thank
book, Radical OBM. What was that journey like becoming a radical OBM?
The journey I think it was just ordered. I became curious about organizational management when I was around 2015. I was pregnant with my second child. And when I went on maternity leave, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do a little certification class. I have nothing else to do for 4 months. I was sitting on the couch with a kid. I could do the whole course virtually. And so instead of just resting, back then I wasn't in my rest phase, but I would never do that now. I would just sit around on the couch and do nothing if I were in that position. But I decided to kind of just learn something new about the science of ABA and see how else I could apply it. I had been in the industry for over 10 years, and I knew that it was time for me to just do something else, do something different, and figure out, was I going to go to the FBI? Was I going to go into forensic psychology? Like, was I going to become some type of other type of therapist or investigator or what? And so I really was just exploring what I wanted to do next. I obtained a specialization certificate in organizational behavior management. And then in 2022, at the end of 2022, I had a phone call with the conference chair for the Black Applied Behavior Analysis Association. And during that call, she said, Portia, you started this business, you built it really quickly. Now you have genius operations and you're wanting to help other businesses. Are you interested in maybe writing a book or designing a class in organizational behavior management? And I was like, do I have time to do that? But she said, the field really needs it, especially from a Black woman. And I just think that you can do it. And I said, okay. So I gave myself 1 year from that day. I said, okay, I'm give myself 1 year and I'm going to write this book. And when I wrote Radical OBM, I really wanted to tell my story for the first time. So the book it's very intentional in that my face is on the cover because most business books, I think it's like 88% or 87% of business books are written by white men and then are also consumed by white men. So I knew if I didn't put my face on the cover, it would be unlikely that a Black person or a Black woman in business would pick it up. And so that's what I led with. And the book really is more conversational. It's a story about my journey in corporate America as a Black woman, and what it was like navigating systemic racism and all of the barriers and hurdles that we have to jump through just to be seen and respected. And not just in our field, but just in general as a working person in the US. And then also how that even, caused me to start masking at work and to start kind of, I wore straight hair for a very long time. I kept my tattoos covered. I spoke in a certain way, just to be accepted. And when I started my own company, I did the same thing. And one day I woke up and said, I'm actually going to be authentically myself and see what that's like. And people did not like that. They appreciated my avatar. And so they did not actually like me. They liked the way that I was showing up in service to them.
Wow.
And so, I had a really rough year at Behavior Genius, just navigating that with my employees, realizing that if I showed up to work as my authentic self, they would not appreciate who I was, including friends and employees who had started the company with me. So that was really hard. And I talk a little bit about that because I think until we move, I ended up going to therapy. And I realized at that time that until I moved all of my old thoughts out of the way, until I addressed even just being a Black child in a predominantly white school, or just everywhere I was where I felt othered or I felt singled out, or I felt this sense of where I didn't have belonging, or my leadership wasn't respected because people are not comfortable submitting to the leadership of a Black woman. And so then I was offended. I spent a lot of time people pleasing. And then when I stopped that, then I moved into offense. And I didn't want to be in either of those places. I just wanted to be comfortable in who I was. And so that's what the book is about. I do talk about leadership. It talks about building systems, really how to build a business, but it's all through the lens of that story and what that was like, and what I had to overcome. Because I think people, they look at someone who has success, that however they label success, and they think that it's insurmountable for them. And the truth of the matter is that all of us can do it. It just takes an insane amount of grit, willingness, and courage, and prayer to get up every day. I was telling my husband a couple months ago, I was like, just waking up every day and still having faith is so hard, because there's sometimes in business where you realize that you are waking up and asking God for just enough faith for the day.
Yeah.
Just to
Yeah.
get through like these meetings that I had. Just give me the faith for today to
Yeah.
even want to come back to this tomorrow, when you're in entrepreneurship.
Mhm.
And make it so glamorous, but entrepreneurship is it's the hardest. Being a CEO is the most difficult job that I've ever had. It's definitely the most volatile thing that I've ever chosen to do. But I choose it every day in service to what God wants me to do, and in service to my community. And so I wanted other people who read this book to connect with it, and to feel seen and heard in the difficult, the dark parts, of building a business. And it's interesting because my book does center Black. Um, I talk about Black history and Black people and Black women. And I've had so many diverse types of people from all over the nation buy this book and find me on social media and connect with me at conferences and um, host book club meetings and buy 15 books for the people that they mentor. And these are not Black people. These are just human beings who can identify, who share in being able to relate to what it's like to feel like less than. And so it's really been an honor and a pleasure, because I'm an introverted person. And so that book has opened up the opportunity for me to connect with people that I wouldn't typically initiate a connection with myself, just because I'm not really the type to go to a networking event. I had never been to a conference until I was invited to speak. And so it's really been amazing to be able to hear the stories of other people and know that they have found relatability in the book, and they found their own power and their own voice
Wow.
by learning more about my story. A story that was really painful for me to experience, and it was also painful for me to tell. But there's been so much joy that's come out of that book. So I'm really grateful.
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome. It reminds me of when Jesus came back and Thomas asked to see the wounds to help him believe. It's like the wounds that you had to bear and had to go through are, God is using them to help other people now.
Yeah, and I thank you for saying that, because I struggled for a long time with this feeling of fame, fame, or like just being well known for my
Mm.
story. Because it's like I know that there's a reason for the story, but I don't want to be I don't want to be glorified for the story, right? So just making sure that the way that the story is told, I get a lot of like, you have so much courage and you're so strong and you're so and those things are true. I have to choose, right? I have to wake up every day and choose to like walk in courage and walk in faith. But there's no way that a normal person would be able to endure what I've endured and
Mm.
keep getting up every day if not for God. And so there's more to the story, and there's always more story to tell. And sometimes I have a hard time sharing the story publicly, because I just want to make sure that people know that this is not me that's able to navigate and kick in these doors. I have a very big God who created me for something beyond what I'm doing now, beyond anything that I
Yeah.
can imagine. And really, I'm learning to submit to Him, and that has been the pillar of every blessing that I've had that's come from this. Is
Mm.
God is forcing me on my face and correcting me where I thought I
Mm.
had it together and I thought I knew what I was doing, and where I just feel like I've just been forced onto my knees at times. And that's where my biggest breakthroughs have happened and have come from, and the strength to just keep getting up and going, okay, God, I know that you have something else for me. I know the story isn't just for no reason. I
Mm.
know that people need to hear it so that they can discover you. And so that's really my prayer, is that, less of me and more of Him
Yeah.
in everything that I do, and as I continue to move forward and break barriers and be the first of this and the first of that, just that people know like where my heart is and that I have such a heart for community and for service, but really that, God is dictating how this is going to go. And I don't want to waste it. I've been through things that I never imagined I'd go through, and I just don't want to waste it. I want to make sure that God gets the glory.
Wow. Wow. Just gotta sit in that for a second. Wow. Amen. And where can the book be purchased?
Amazon, Amazon.com, and it'll be to you in 2 days. Prime members, you can get it in 2 days. Yeah, it's on Amazon.
Oh, that's so great. And you also have a mentorship group called the Catalyst.
I do.
That's
Yeah.
correct, right?
I started a small mentorship group, and I actually just wanted to, like, people ask me if I mentor, and I just don't have time to do like one-to-one meetings and phone calls and give out my phone number. But I am interested in connecting with people who are on a path and just want a little bit of direction. And so I started Catalyst for that reason. And then a couple of months ago, I was like, I don't want to talk about anything except for what God is doing for me. So I went through really hard. Quarter 4 of this past year was just really difficult. And I went into the platform. It's on Patreon. And I was like, hey, I haven't been in here in a few weeks. I am going through a transformation, and you could stick around for it. I would love for you to. I'll drop the gems. But so I try to go in there and leave encouragement, but more so than encouragement, it's really just like how God speaks to me, is speaking to me about my business now that I'm choosing to listen. And so if someone would have been sending me Bible verses that were related to what I was experiencing in business, gosh, I would have probably come to some of the discoveries a lot sooner and had a lot less heartache. So just trying to, if God's speaking to me about business, I want to share that with other people who are interested in knowing what God says about business and about leadership, because it makes so much of it makes sense. We look at it through the lens of biblical entrepreneurship in the Bible. It helps so much to know that all of this was predestined, and that this isn't just happening to us, and that people in the Bible, we think of like, a lot of times we just think of like the Bible stories that we know and when God calls people, but really when you're reading the Bible, you read about how difficult it was for those people and what they were experiencing. And these people were asking to like go into whole entire cities and just countries and take over and bring down the king. And these little people didn't think they knew they even had the skill, or that Moses didn't feel that he had the speech or the language to speak to people, right? And so it's just God has really been revealing some things about myself and how I have positioned myself in business and how I should be positioning myself in business. And I want other business owners to be able to tap into that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Where can people sign up?
It's on Patreon. And so if you just search my name on Patreon, Portia James, you should be able to find it, or Catalyst. I'm on there. The link is also in my bio on Instagram.
Wow, that is awesome. I can definitely see you on the Mount Rushmore of business women. You are doing it.
Thank you. I can only hope. Thank you so much.
Definitely. You're a wife, a mother, over operations, making some amazing power moves with your businesses. How do you press the pause button to refresh and rejuvenate?
I turn my out of office reply on, sometimes just for no reason. It's on right now. Sometimes I just turn it on for a week because I want everyone to know. I just don't want the obligation of feeling like I owe people a quick response. I travel with my family. We try to, go out and do things as a family with my kids. We have movie nights, things like that just ground me, and, play with the dogs. But my favorite thing to do to unplug is really just to get in the car and to drive. Lately, one thing that our family likes to do is to just hop in the car. We put the dogs in there and we just drive east until we get to Arizona. And right before we enter the state lines, we find out where we're going to stay for the weekend. So more family getaways, even the small ones, just
Yeah.
driving. We're an hour and a half from San Diego, just getting out of the city, doing something because my brain is always moving. So if I'm sitting at home, a lot of times I'm thinking about work or thinking about a new idea that I have.
Mhm.
So I like to get out of the house with my kids and with my husband.
I like that. That is so important.
Yeah.
Thank you again for coming on. Remember, to the world, you may be one person, but to one person, you may be the world. Appreciate you.
Thank
That,
you, Brian. I appreciate you. This was so much fun.
that was great. Well, thank you everyone again for tuning in. I know beyond a shadow of doubt that you've been greatly blessed by this. Feel free to watch it and watch again. Sometimes, like watching a movie, you see things the second time that you didn't necessarily see the first time. And of course, definitely share. And as always, thank him for rocking and rolling with me these 9 seasons. And as always, this is BDP, Brian David Porter, still living in purpose, on purpose, intentionally. Till next time, y'all be blessed.